The Heat got a steady dose of the two-time MVP Nikola Jokic, and Miami's usual strategy of trying to do just enough for 45 minutes and ensure a last-minute comeback fell short, and the team's 8-game home winning streak came to an end. We break it all down and answer your questions today on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil, however you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. We're talking here on a Monday night after the Heat lost to the Nuggets 112-108, bringing their 8-game home win streak to an end. Against the number one team in the West, they did a lot of things right, David. They won the rebounding battle, kept turnovers low, they made plays in transition, outshot the Nuggets, but ultimately the mountain of injuries were too much to overcome. The bench was outscored 34-19. The Nuggets shot 58% overall from the field. And now, without Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, and Victor Oladipo, that's not an excuse considering that the Nuggets were without Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon. The Heat had a chance to bring it to a one-possession game late, but Jimmy Butler whiffed on a wide-open layup with 13 seconds left, and that pretty much sealed the game. The Nuggets were, of course, led by Nikola Jokic, 27 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists for him. Bam Adebayo struggled on offense, 19 points on just 6 of 14 shooting, but he had his hands full having to guard Nikola Jokic all night. Jimmy Butler finished with 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists, and Max Strus added 23 points. But, David, where did the Heat lose this game to you?
To me, it was all about Jokic. I think he was the centerpiece of the Denver victory. A lot of just trying to play catch-up because he singularly controlled the pace in a way that no Heat player is really capable of. And that's the dismaying part here is that Bam, as you mentioned, had his hands full. And it was evident right away in the first quarter. I tweeted something out about it because it was just so obvious how much energy he would have to expend on the defensive end, just trying to contain him a little bit. Hands, trying to jockey for position, trying to deny the ball, trying to just make things uncomfortable for him. And Jokic, for all the comments about his lack of athleticism, doesn't care. He is an immovable object there, and he was just getting the ball, swinging an arm this way, a ducking under in one direction, a ducking under in the other direction, easy layup, or just holding the ball with those huge hands of his and just darting passes to shooters out in the perimeter. Michael Porter Jr. had it going early on. Bruce Brown had it going on, incredible attacking the rim from him. So I think that's really where it was, is that Miami, depending on the same recipe as always, Bam doing everything possible, and he just wasn't able to score enough tonight. No Tyler, who would have provided a bucket or two here and there to make things more interesting. Jimmy, a little too passive for me as well, something we'll talk about in the next segment. But I think the conversation begins and ends with Jokic, and I hate gushing or flattering him that much, but it's just evident watching this style of play. At no point in time did they ever look fazed by the Heat. They didn't seem like they were concerned. They were down 11. They were like, okay, well, we'll just continue to do our thing. Even when Jokic was out, they were able to close that gap pretty quickly. So they just play their own pace.
That's probably where the Heat ultimately lost this game, was not being able to win the non-Nikola Jokic minutes. Those bench points were just killer. I know they just added Thomas Bryant, and he was good for them, 10 points off the bench in 14 minutes. But you got to win those Jokic minutes, or the minutes when Jokic is off the bench. Yeah, on the bench. You can't lose those minutes. And that's been kind of the story for the Denver Nuggets, right? Is as good as they are when Jokic is on the court. And this is why he's won 2 straight MVPs, is because all the net ratings and whatever advanced metrics and just their record overall when he is on the court is awesome. But when he's off the court is when they struggle. And that seems to be the case for most stars. And for Denver, it's taking them a while to figure that out. Thomas Bryant, I guess, is a step in the right direction for them. But if you're the Heat, you can't flatly lose those minutes, right? Like, if you lose those minutes, I knew the Heat were going to lose this game in the first half, David. I knew it, because that first long stretch without Nikola Jokic, where the Nuggets actually increased their lead,
right?
It's over. Like, you just it's over after that because Jokic is going to play a majority of his minutes in the second half anyway. So at that point, I was like, it's going to take a miracle for the Heat to win this game. Now you could blame the Heat for that, but to me, it also kind of comes back to the injuries. I know that the Nuggets were missing two of their best starters too, but their bench was basically whole still. Right? Bruce Brown usually plays 30-something minutes a game for them anyway. He's their sixth man for the most part.
No Bones Highland, who just recently got traded.
Which is sort of an addition by subtraction for them, honestly. And they got great minutes from Jeff Green, 12 points off the bench, and you can't really count on that from Jeff Green. But look, the Heat, Orlando Robinson, Jamari Bouye, and Haywood Highsmith, that's not an NBA bench. And they played okay. And Jamari Bouye, we'll get to him a little bit later too. And Haywood Highsmith, we like Haywood Highsmith in these parts, but that's not an NBA bench, all right? And when you're already missing so many guys, and you have to elevate guys into that starting group, that's not feasible, and so you're just gonna lose minutes, right? You're not gonna win a lot of minutes, even without Nikola Jokic on the court for your opponent. So I thought they lost the game there. The Jimmy Butler whiff at the end was tough. We could talk about the offensive basket interference thing. That was offensive basket interference. I watched it on the broadcast tonight. They showed a million angles of it, and basically every angle pretty much showed it was basket interference. And so I don't think that has anything to do with it in terms of officiating. So. Yeah, I think the Heat were really banged up, and they lost to a really good team. And to your Jokic point, he's the two-time MVP for a reason. He is dominant. He is absolutely dominant. Spoelstra talked about this after the game. He's dominant in a way that a lot of stars aren't dominant. It's a different kind of style of play. It takes a while to get used to. And the fact that they're a Western Conference team that they only face twice a year, it's really hard to game plan against that, right? And so Nikola Jokic is dominant. And as much as we love Jimmy and Bam, this is the difference between even top 15 players in the NBA and maybe the best player in the NBA.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They just didn't have enough answer. And I don't know, we could look at the injury because I think it kind of, there's a waterfall effect to that or a cascading effect to it, where you have to change your rotations around and you don't have Tyler to kind of boost those bench minutes with his offense, Victor and his defense. Maybe that changes things to a certain degree, but I was a little surprised that Eric Spoelstra didn't do a better job staggering the Jimmy and Bam minutes too, because I think it was just too clear. Like he stuck with his plan, something that Spo is a little too.
Well, there was only really one stretch where two of them weren't on the court in the third quarter.
There was a minute there where it was several minutes of the undrafted five out there.
It was like at the end of the third quarter. I think he did the best he can. I was a little surprised. I'm with you. I was a little surprised to see any minute without them, but it is tough.
No doubt. I mean, that's why I can't nitpick with that.
Right.
It's just, to me, the Heat didn't even lose the game. And I know a lot of fans will swear by that, but I think they just got beat by a better team with an all-star
really good, man.
MVP type player.
Yeah. They're 40-18. They're the best record in the Western Conference, the best team in the Western Conference. And I know Kevin Durant just got to Phoenix, but they got to prove it. The Denver Nuggets are that good. Like the Suns have to prove that they're better than the Nuggets, more than just on paper. And look, the Heat, they've been in all these clutch games, man, and now they're 23-18 in clutch games. When you're playing this many clutch games, it's cool. I know the Heat have been winning a lot of these clutch games lately, and you can talk about, oh yeah, they're developing character in these minutes and they're learning how to win close games. And yeah, I guess they are, and that's why they went from losing all these games to winning all these games more recently. But if you're playing this many clutch games, you're going to lose a few. And if you're going to lose one, you're going to lose one maybe to the best team in the NBA in the Denver Nuggets, still without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter, but maybe with the best player in the NBA.
Aaron Gordon was missing out. I was curious to see I was curious to see that matchup because it seemed like early on Jimmy would be able to dictate the terms a little bit, not to the same degree as Jokic eventually wound up doing so, but without Gordon to defend him, you saw Jimmy kind of semi-aggressive at first, but more point.
I thought he was really aggressive getting to the basket, like
at first,
at the very start of the game.
And then he became more playmaker Jimmy. And he was like, all right, let me get Gabe going. Let me get Bam going. Let me see if I could get Max going.
Credit to Denver, though. I mean, they blocked. They pinched every time Jimmy Butler tried to drive. They made their adjustments defensively. They're like, oh, Jimmy's going to do this? All right, we're going to take away the paint. And they did a pretty good job. Jimmy didn't get to the line nearly as much as you think. He ended up going 7 of 7 from the free throw line. But I do credit the Nuggets defense quite a bit for that. I know a lot of people are going to blame Jimmy Butler for the passivity. We're going to talk about that next. Also, you and I don't think that this is an embarrassing loss, but there are people who do. We're going to talk about all of that after this break. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. It's so easy to make your favorite NBA bets. You can include the spread, whatever total points, rebounds, assists, whatever player props you can think of. So many exclusive bets, like 2 times 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and earn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember, we're also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. Well, David, that smelly smell is the smell of another smelly loss, and so it's time to hand out some blame pie. And we actually have some listener recommendations for where we're giving out this blame pie here. First one comes from Mark, who writes in, Jimmy, for that one botched layup that could have produced a whole different outcome. So just to recap that, the Heat, within 2 possessions, Jimmy running the ATO, Jimmy Butler, wide open look, darts right to the basket. No Denver Nuggets around him at all, and just front rims a layup, and very uncharacteristic. Jimmy Butler afterwards just sort of staring at the rim as if it did something wrong, and it's like, no, Jimmy, you did something wrong there. You should have. I don't know if the layup, maybe you should have just dunked it. He was wide open. There's no excuse for it. Do the Heat win the game if Jimmy Butler makes that layup? They'd be within a possession with 13 seconds left. I guess at that point you can play the foul game. Maybe you can go for the steal on the inbound, obviously, and then if the Nuggets are able to get it in, you can play the foul game. Maybe they miss one, you come back, you make a 3. I suppose it was a bad layup to miss.
Yeah, this isn't one. It doesn't boil down to any just one play. I think it was 48 minutes of inconsistency from Jimmy and everybody else, to that matter. So I don't know that he deserves multiple pieces of blame pie. One seems fair, I think, mostly again due to the passivity that you hinted at in the last segment. Again, he changed things a little bit, mostly due to Denver's defense, perhaps, or just a recognition in the game that he needed to get everybody else going, but not the kind of night that we're accustomed to seeing from Jimmy when he's at his most engaged and aggressive. And I thought he would be tonight with the opportunity to take on, the best team in the Western Conference. I thought going up against Denver, he'd rise up to the challenge and say, this is a point that we want to make as a team, that we want to be able to establish ourselves. Unfortunately, not the case for him. Just 8 of 18 overall.
5 field goal attempts in the first quarter, which is pretty good for Jimmy Butler in 9 minutes. He didn't even play the full, he had to rest in the first quarter. He took his usual rest. 13 attempts the rest of the way after those first 9 minutes. That is not good. And look, at the end of the day, he still had nearly a triple-double, 24 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. To be knocking him for that on an efficient night, to be knocking him on that seems crazy. But it's also really the only option. It's only really him and Bam. Like, if you want to knock, for instance, Caleb Martin and Max Strus, it's just, what else do you expect out of these guys? No Tyler Herro, no Kyle Lowry, no Victor Oladipo. Like, those are your guys. It's Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. And Eric Spoelstra knew that those were the guys because he spent most of the game making sure one of those two were on the court at all times, best he could, like we were talking about earlier. But, he knew he had to have one of them on the court at all times. And that's a lot, like when Jimmy is playing most of his minutes without Bam and having to shoulder everything, that wears on you. And I think it wore on Bam, especially on offense. He was so gassed, man. Like, you could see. It was the first time, I think, all year I saw Bam Adebayo tired.
He's played long minutes. He's done everything on both ends of the floor repeatedly for Miami. And yet, to my point earlier, I don't know I've ever seen him work so hard defensively as just trying to contain Jokic.
It was like two defensive schemes at once that he was trying to execute. The first thing was keeping Jokic out of the paint altogether. And Jokic is enormous and extremely strong. And so to just try to keep him out of the paint is enough of a job, right? That is a full-time job as it is.
He just leans his weight completely on an opponent, like a defender in Bam's case. Like he's just leaning on him, and he just seems again immovable in that position. Yeah. Everybody questions about him, calling him fat boy and fatty this and all that. Man, I don't know how if he is not ripped by any stretch of the imagination. But to your point, he's also extremely strong and just knows how to use his body and position very, very effectively.
So Bam had to start every possession like that. And then when he would get in position, ultimately several seconds into the shot clock, but he would eventually get into position. And when Denver was looking to get the entry pass into him, he would have to switch into fronting them.
Right.
And so that was the whole game. That was the entire game. So no wonder Bam Adebayo couldn't do anything on offense. He was exhausted. Like I said, it was the first time I've seen Bam Adebayo tired the entire season. That guy is in impeccable shape, impeccable conditioning. It's all the reasons why Udonis Haslem is bestowing upon him the torch of Heat culture, right? Is because of all those things. But every human being has his limits, and I think we saw it tonight with Bam. So I'm even hesitant to give Bam blame pie.
Kind of have to, right?
But you kind of have to at the same time, because where else are you going to get it?
I'll give him one more. I'll give him a piece of pie as well as we gave to Jimmy. But I think you just give 8 pieces of pie to Nikola Jokic. Like, that's fair. Like, this is almost like credit pie and blame pie and blame cookies at the same time, because it's just like he was a reason for Miami's demise. There were singular plays towards the end there that were head scratching. There's the overall theme of, well, you don't have much talent and you're using all these undrafted players, and your thin roster gets even thinner when you have no Oladipo, no Herro, and no Lowry. Although many people would think, well, not having Lowry maybe is a good thing. But in tonight's case, maybe they could have used him to some degree. It just wasn't enough. They didn't have enough on there. So who else are you going to bestow any kind of blame on other than Jimmy and Bam?
I'll give 2 to Jimmy.
Ooh.
1 to Bam, because you have to. And then that leaves 7 for Jokic. And look, I just looked it up. Gibanica. Serbian cheese pie. Gibanica. Cottage cheese. Cheese, sour cream, phyllo dough, milk, and olive oil.
Sure, why not?
Sometimes it could be feta cheese as well, according to the first line on Google. Sounds pretty good.
Better than cottage cheese, sure. Yeah.
Not a big cottage cheese guy. Eric Spoelstra. I mean, I know every fans are going to always want to give blame pie to Eric Spoelstra after every loss. Again, I have a hard time doing it. What else do you do? The injuries that he was dealing with, all these things, plus the fact that, like he said after the game, this is such a unique team, the way that they run their offense. They're not running pick and roll after pick and roll like most teams are in the NBA, right? They're running everything through Nikola Jokic. They have a very unique offense, very unique looks, different kinds of triggers that other teams just don't use. And the fact that this is a team in the Western Conference and that they don't see all that often, it makes it really hard to game plan for Jokic, right? It'd be one thing if he was in your division and you saw him all the time, but they see him twice a year, and he's got a new supporting cast. Even before the last time they saw him this year, since the trade deadline, it's a new supporting cast, right? So it's just it's hard. I know
it's
that
not like
they were missing a couple of their guys, but it's hard.
Teams that see him regularly don't have a game plan for him either. So I think there's no way of really limiting him. He's all right. One thing that really stood out, if I can, I mean, again, it's turned into locked on Jokic here. He just seems so unfazed by the pace of the game. He's
better than David. He's better than he was when he won the 2 MVPs. He's better now.
Ooh.
I don't know if that means he's going to win MVP again, but no, exactly. He seems just so much more in control of his powers than he had even previously. Like he seems. It's a great observation. Just calm.
I've seen Giannis play. I've seen Embiid play. And nothing comes close to it. Just the sheer kind of like nonchalant dominance that Jokic exerts in every game.
Yeah. Well, we already talked about whether Jimmy and Bam were too passive, but people still think that this is a, quote, embarrassing loss. We'll talk about that next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. And that's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. I know how difficult it can be to find the right person for your job, and LinkedIn makes it easy. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, their company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find a qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Let's get to some of our listener questions. And this first one comes from Daniel, who writes in, embarrassing loss, letting Joker destroy them without 2 starters. Why was Max Strus shooting more than Jimmy and Bam? Let's talk about whether or not this is an embarrassing loss before we get to the Max Strus point there. Do you think it was an embarrassing loss?
I do not. Again, best team in the West, but one of the best teams in the league, MVP type player. You do what you can, a little shorthanded and not being able to, kind of rely on the same recipe that you have that's worked for better or for worse, to keep games close, to slow the pace down, to do just enough offensively where you can eke out a win. It didn't work because, Denver and Jokic are just that good. So I don't think you can do anything to really limit Jokic. To our points earlier and to the question, I mean, maybe they allowed him to dominate, but again, I think 29 other teams allow him to dominate too, and that's just the nature of having an MVP level player. So not embarrassing to me.
Even without the injuries, the Heat are uniquely constructed to get blasted by Nikola Jokic. This is a small team. They only have Bam Adebayo to throw at him, and as good as Bam did, nobody can guard Nikola Jokic one.
No one asked if the Heat are missing Dwayne Dedmon tonight.
Nobody did. So yeah, again, not to make this all Jokic love, but look, we're just telling you what happened on the court today. If you want to sit there and blame the officiating or Spo or Bam or Jimmy, go ahead. That's a fan's job. That's Twitter's job. You can find all that on Twitter. But at the end of the day, this is a team that plays a lot of clutch games. And when you play a lot of clutch games, you're going to win a bunch of them. You're going to lose a bunch of them. And I don't think that there was a logical outcome, a reasonable expectation beyond anything other than a clutch game in this one. This is one of the best teams in the league. Both teams kind of banged up. With the MVP still on their roster, the reigning MVP still on their in their lineup, and I don't think that was reasonable to think that. I know that the Heat led by 10 or 11 points early in the game. That was never going to happen the entire game. They were never going to blow out the Denver Nuggets at home. It's just not with this many injuries. It was just never going to happen. So, look, they took a really good team. Both teams banged up, but a very good team down to the wire. And so if you want to say it's embarrassing, go ahead. But it's not embarrassing. This is just another NBA night, okay? It's not a big deal. Shooting more than Jimmy or Bam. Any point on that?
No, yeah, that to me was a little inexcusable. I know he had the hot hand going early on, and I think you try and continue to provide a spark because, again, who else is going to be out there for you? So you've got to try to do what you can. I can't blame Max for that. I mean, what player doesn't want to be able to shoot as much as possible? Yeah. If anything, you could look to, again, Denver's defense doing a good job of limiting Bam's opportunities. Maybe Jimmy and Bam both being a little passive. The size problem, the exertion level from Bam defensively. They took some of the aggression that we were used to seeing this season from him. Shot far too less. I mean, only 14 total field goal attempts for Bam. Not great. Below the 15 mark that he wanted, below the 18 mark he's been hovering about for most of the season. But so not great from him.
I'll say this. When the Nuggets were shooting almost 70% on their 2-pointers tonight, the only real way to catch up is with the 3-pointer, right? And so Jimmy and Bam aren't shooting threes. Jimmy went 1 for 2, but that's about the best it gets for Jimmy Butler in the regular season, at least. You needed your 3-point shooters to step up. And so I think they got into the paint early in the game. Denver adjusted by trying to take it away a little bit more. And so Max Strus was open. Those 14 3-point looks he got, I don't remember seeing a bad one. Those were open shots. Gabe Vincent went 4 of 9. He took 9 3-pointers. Those were open shots. Jamari Bouye went 2 of 4. Haywood Highsmith went 1 of 4. I don't blame them for trying to catch up with the 3-ball when Denver was as dominant as they were in the paint. Maybe you want to blame Miami's defense for that, but that was it.
One egregious 3-pointer from Max, and it wasn't his fault at all. It was a really, really bogged down position that I tweeted about from the Locked On Heat account. It was Bam not seizing an opportunity with a mismatch when he was being guarded by Christian Brown. Not a good look for him. He inexplicably wound up passing the ball, then kicked it out to a wide open Jimmy Butler in the corner, who saw Nikola Jokic, closing the gap towards him, and then made this crazy cross-court pass as the shot clock was expiring.
Oh, yeah.
And Bam had Max had no chance but to put up a three-pointer, and he wound up getting blocked.
Yeah.
I can't recall by who. I think Michael Porter Jr. It doesn't matter.
No, it was
Chanchar,
however you say it.
Chanchar, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was the only one. All right, next question. Anthony Chang reporting that there's mutual interest between the Heat and Serge Ibaka, who's going to hit the buyout market. What are your thoughts on Ibaka, David?
I said this weeks ago. I remember we were talking about it when the trade first happened, and I said, I could see Ibaka being a realistic target for the Heat just because he kind of fits the same model as they have in the past. He's a veteran. He fits an area of need.
Injury prone.
Oh, well, maybe not that part, but the older towards the end of his career.
It's the Heat kind of way. Hey, do you struggle staying healthy and staying on the court? We got a spot for you on the roster.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see this. He's tall. He's a okay rebounder, shot blocker. Still, I think he has that potential. He doesn't really have any kind of elite burst or hops or anything like that. He can shoot the three. I think that's mostly what his role would be. He's probably a slightly springier version of Dwayne Dedmon, and I think that's the best you can.
And a better shooter, probably. Yeah. Look, and maybe not a guy who's going to throw stuff onto the court when he gets upset and pulled from games. I think that would be the other thing.
He'll keep that to the locker room, I think.
Yeah. So, look, is Serge Ibaka moving the needle for me? No. This is not Serge Ibaka the way that he was 10 years ago. He's not somebody that can play with Bam Adebayo. That's not going to happen. He would come off the bench as your third center, maybe your fourth center on a night where you actually want to use Orlando Robinson's 2-day contract. I don't know. It doesn't change anything to me if I'm the Miami Heat. Omer Yurtsevic's coming back soon after the All-Star break. You still have Orlando Robinson. I think there are other center possibilities out there that I'd prefer at this point. Ibaka's just not if you're looking for somebody to play power forward, Ibaka's not that guy, not at this stage in his career. And so I think there might be other options. Stanley Johnson is out there. I'm not telling you that that's the option that I would go for, but I would prefer playing him, even if he's small at the 4, because at least he can move. And look at Miami's defense, by the way. They switch everything. They ask a lot. They ask their defenders to create turnovers and jump passing lanes and things like that. You think Serge Ibaka's doing that? No, he's not. He would be a once a week use kind of center, and I just don't know that the Heat need that right now.
I'm a little surprised.
He will get hurt.
I'm a little surprised that Ibaka is considering, because with the reporting around his trade being that he wants a bigger role than what he was getting in Milwaukee. I don't know that that's available in Miami. Yeah. He's probably not going to get more minutes.
He probably looks at Miami and he says, "Hey, they need size. I'm big. Maybe there's more of a role for me there." There'd be more of a role for him in Miami than there was Milwaukee, but that's a low bar.
Yeah.
There was no role for him in Milwaukee. Maybe he would play once a week in Miami. That's a bigger role, I guess. Yeah. All right, that'll do it for us today. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for joining me from Miami-Dade Arena.
Sorry for all the noise in the background. We had no choice here.